Stay more comfortable, more concealed, and in the stand longer with Osseo gear. Premium camouflage apparel created for bow hunters by bow hunters. Osseo's revolutionary patented camo patterns and innovative features are designed to keep whitetail bow hunters totally invisible and dead quiet. Elevate your game with Osseo. Visit asiogear.com and take 20% off your purchase with code TRUTH20. Mobile hunters, our buddies over at Tethered are always innovating to keep us more mobile and in the game when it counts. From the Tethered One Sticks, the Fast Pack, to the Ultra Lock saddle, Tethered is always designing to increase comfort and utility while reducing bulk, weight, and fiddle factor of mobile hunting gear. And now, they've outdone themselves yet again by creating the carbon fiber forged Predator CFX platform, the latest fully featured mobile saddle platform that raises the bar for what's possible in mobile hunting gear. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old tree climbing veteran, go to tetherednation.com for all your saddle hunting gear. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I got on a fella that, truth be told, probably should have had him on a long time ago. I think we were chatting right before we started recording that we connected like a year or two ago to try to sync up. It didn't work out. And then here we are like 2 years later, finally making it happen. But none other than Mr. Sam Ubel from Chase Nation. What's going on, man?
Hey, man, thanks for having me on. I'm glad we're able to finally connect.
Yeah, that's right, man. It's like we were talking before we started recording, and I actually started trying to think back, because I always try to figure out or think back, like, when's the first time I had like an interaction with this person that I'm going to have on, or when did I learn of them, or how did I learn of them, or whatever the case is.
Sure.
And for you, it was two epic photos that I saw. That the one was from a whitetail adrenaline video, and then one was a snow-covered buck in a canoe image. Yeah. And I was like, and then I learned who you were, and I was like, dang, man, I need to do some water access. You know, it's kind of where it went, dude. And then I learned a little bit more about you. You're a hell of a hunter. You like to travel to hunt and stuff like that. And I got to know you from afar, and we have some mutual friends and stuff like that. And it was just one of those things where I was like, dude, I got to have this guy on. So that was like my initial kind of introduction to you.
Cool, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, those photos that you're talking about, that was one season. I mean, I've killed more than just 2 bucks using water, but those particular 2 photos, the Snowy River one and the Whitetail Adrenaline one, that was just I don't know, a few weeks apart.
Are you serious? I thought for some reason I thought they were further apart, man, but that's a pretty freaking epic season, dude, to do that twice in a few weeks.
Yeah, and even better, I had, with my bow that year, I'd killed a piebald in Wisconsin, and then I drove out to Minnesota. I hunted with Jared for a week, shot that nice buck on the public out there, that boat access one with the canoe. Then came back, and then for shotgun season or firearm season here in Wisconsin, was able to get out hunting again, and I took that boat down the river. It was a terrible snowy day. Normally snow doesn't bother me that much, but I mean, it was wet and nasty snow. It was like 7 inches before we even got to the river access, and I went through 3 pairs of gloves that day. It was terrible. It was saturated, and the camera gear, keeping that dry. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, dude, I don't know how you guys do it, man. Like, you know, it's my camera gear is cheap in comparison to what you guys are using and stuff like that. And even if I take mine out and it starts to rain or snow or whatever, I get a little kind of jumpy where I'm like, oh man, let me take this thing off real quick and just throw it in my bag to keep the weather off of it or whatever. But I can't imagine doing it with like gear that's, you know, costing you thousands of dollars. I would lose my mind. I for sure would drop it out of I've not dropped the camera out of a tree yet, like, knock on wood. So this will be the year that I do. But if I had a real nice one, it would have already hit the ground.
Yeah, with the lens and the body and the mics, I mean, we're around 10 grand. I mean, hey, let's go dump 10 grand on camera equipment and then go take it into the absolute nastiest conditions and environments for cameras. It's not a match made in heaven, but it's definitely a passion. So it's an investment of more than just money. It's a lot of things, right?
Yeah, man. I always say it's like, so this year I killed a buck in PA, and it was a water access buck, and, you know, kayaked him out and stuff. And I always kind of joke, because I start off the season every year with I'm going to take my camera every trip. You know what I mean? I'm going to film everything. And that usually lasts so about mid-October, and then it's like I'm like, screw
Burn
this,
out.
man. This thing pissing me off. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like, and then I stopped taking it, and I stopped carrying it. But so this year I killed this deer on like the 16th of October, so it was still early, and I still had it with me, and so I'm filming, and I caught him like as he was coming in. I filmed him like coming in. I filmed him on a scrape, like making a scrape and stuff, and then he came in real close, and I think the final shot was like like 10 yards. And I had the camera on him, and I went to stand in my saddle and kind of move the draw. And when I did, like one of the bags on my saddle hit the camera and like moved it off of him, and I could feel it moving as I was drawing. I was like, I don't think he's in frame anymore. And I shot him, and then you could see him like run off a frame. So it's like not even like good enough footage that I could even make like a little YouTube video out of for myself or whatever. But the funny thing is like that's the best footage that I've ever gotten was that.
Well, I mean, guys got to really ask himself, right? What am I doing with this camera? Like, am I
Mhm.
doing this because I want to watch my shot and then study it to figure out if I hit the deer right before I go tracking? Are you doing it because you're a content creator and you want to share the content, or are you doing it for personal reasons? Sometimes that personal reason could be, to make a video for yourself that you share with friends and family, or you just make for yourself for memory's sake. But other reasons that I've actually witnessed, and on our maturing, I don't even know. It feels like the opposite, really. Industry and hunting in general is people doing things just to make it harder on themselves, almost
Mhm.
like I don't want to. I'm not just saying this, but I mean, to be honest, it almost seems like a way to gloat. Like, hey,
Mhm.
I filmed it. It was on public land.
Yep.
Went above and beyond to get to the land. I had to
Mhm.
paddle against whitecaps. Like 2 miles both
Yeah.
ways, and
Uphill both ways.
otherwise people seem to. I don't know why, but I strongly suspect it's because of social media, right? Because
Hmm.
so many people are posting pictures of their deer and their videos on social media. It almost feels like people uh, don't feel like their buck is worthy or that their hunt was worthy unless they have a strong story to go with it.
Hmm. Hmm.
But that's not always the case, right? I mean, like the water access for me, it really isn't just about adventure. I mean, hell, I love the adventure of it,
Hmm.
but it's the way that I was brought up. My dad told me we're hunting public land. You're not going to find deer where everybody else is hunting, so we got to get to the hard to go places. So, I mean, we were hunting marshes. I mean, my dad called himself a marsh rat growing up. That's what I remember him calling himself. And shoot, I mean, we uh we used to talk to farmers, and I shouldn't say we, I was just a kid, but my dad would. He'd talk to farmers on the backside of public land, knock on their doors and offer to do chores for them, like follow the tractor and the flatbed trailer that the tractor would haul and pick up rocks and like heave
Hmm.
them into the trailer. Every year in the spring, all the erosion pushes rocks to the top of the soil in those fields, so those farmers got to do that. My dad would do that work for him just to get permission to cross cattle pastures to get to the backside of public land. And he, for a long time, some of my best memories are, and he's still around, so don't make it seem like it's past tense, but we
Right.
don't do this anymore together the way we used to. He's older now, but he had this single axle. I don't know if you call it a bunk that he put his canoe on,
Hmm.
and he would roll it across this cow pasture, and I'd just do everything I could to keep up with him. Then we get back into the woods, and is painstaking, right? And you get eventually to these fire lanes, they called them, that you would round like the hills, and we get to the backside of these hills where the marsh was. Well, this one particular spot I'm remembering right now, where the marsh was, and he would go and stash the that bunk, that little trailer thing he would use to portage the canoe. He'd cover it with branches and leaves, and then he even had it, it's like an ammunition box that was stainless steel, or I'm not sure what kind of metal it was. It was painted army green. He got it at some army surplus store. He kept first aid kit in there and some snacks, and he actually buried that with a latrine shovel, like straight up army style. So it
Right.
was always in the same place. So if we ever got into a situation back there in the woods, he had, a med kit. It's like a video game thinking about
Right.
it. But then even go further, man, he would put marsh skis. I don't, have you ever heard of a marsh ski?
No, I haven't. I remember we were talking before, like we started recording. You mentioned marsh skis, and I wanted to ask you what those are because I've never heard of those.
Yeah, when we get off this call, I'll send you some pictures to kind of help you like visualize what it is. But essentially, there's two different types of marsh ski. There's a flat kind, which is made of wood, and it was typically ash or basswood, if I remember right. And what he would do is he would heat water. Now, like what he would make snowshoes. It's so funny because I'm never down here in my bar. But like, here's a pair of snowshoes that he made,
Oh,
and
nice.
the way that this wood is curved, he would get a gutter, put water in it, start a fire like a bed of coals, and get that water boiling to soften the wood. Then it's pliable and then it bends, right? And you gotta like tie it up and whatever. I don't do the trade or whatever, but I just
Right.
remember what he's taught me over the years, and it stays. The same concept with those marsh keys. So the front of it had to flip up, kind of like if you think about like an elf shoe. You know how they
Mhm.
kind of like if you visualize a cartoon character of an elf.
Yeah.
And the whole reason was obviously when it's like cross country skiing, but through cattails, right?
Hmm.
They're not buoyant. That wasn't the purpose of them, but they were so long, like something like 8 feet long, and so that large footprint in the cattail bogs and the hummocks, they would keep you above the water. So at least one end or both ends would kind of bridge that gap, and you could just ski through the marsh to get to the islands out there where we'd bow hunt. Those are and we'd do that for duck hunting too, and we'd you know drag the canoe for a really long ways that way through the cattails to get to open water. Sometimes just to paddle to get to spots that you knew nobody else was accessing unless they were putting in that kind of work. So for me, like when I think about water access and like the adventure kind of comes with it, but we didn't do it just so we could tell the story of the adventure so much as we did it because it was essential. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, dude, that's awesome. So, even before the whole public land hunting craze, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And we're going further than everybody, right? Like you're like the old timers, man. Like there was still this idea of like just going where the people aren't, right? Whatever it took to do that, to get away from the pressure, to get away from the people, right? And whether that was
Big time.
like the ski thing, man, that's wild, man, because I'd never heard of that, you know.
Yeah, that's some stuff that like he read about, and then he investigated like who some of like the makers of them were. He tells me the story every now and again about going and meeting the guy, and for the life of me, I can't remember his name, but I don't know if that really matters so much. I don't think he was somebody who had a prominent name. This is going
Mhm.
back into like the late '60s, right?
Right.
But I mean, that's where he learned from this one man, and then he went a step further. Like I was just talking about the flat version, so he also learned how to make a more buoyant version. And I wouldn't say you can go walk over open water with it, but like if you were to get into a situation where you fell in, which I never experienced that. Maybe he had, and I don't know about it, but you'd have something floating that you could like grab onto, or would potentially keep you more afloat, so to speak, than
Mhm.
the flat ones. But it
Right.
was essentially all it was he built a box the same shape as those skis, but it was about 7 or 8 inches high, and then he wrapped that in fiberglass, and really that's about all there is to it. I mean, you can use stucco to harden that fiberglass or some
Mhm.
polyurethane or whatever. He'd probably slap me silly. He'd never do that, but he'd probably have words with me later about describing the process incorrectly. But I'm pretty sure it's close as it can be.
Right. Right.
He hasn't done it
That,
himself.
that's awesome, man. Like just the ingenuity back then of like, where there wasn't
Yeah,
necessarily a product to buy, or if there was, maybe there wasn't a store close by, or whatever the case is, you know what I mean? Like just finding a way, like knowing like, hey, there's big bucks back in this marsh back here, and there's no people, or you like, probably not even using trail cameras, you know what I mean, or any type of identifier, right? You know what I mean? So it's like you don't even know other than from your scouting, and you're going, I'm just going to go get away from people, and I'm going to go where it's remote, and by God, there's going to be a big buck back there. And I was talking to a buddy of mine about this, like, I don't know what it was, like 2 weeks ago, and it was just, whenever you get the opportunity to sit down with like some old timers and kind of talk to them, or if you get to spend some time in the woods with them, and you just watch how they kind of go about it. And, anyone who's spent time in the woods with an old timer has had this experience where they stop somewhere and you're kind of watching them and they go, there's a big buck in here. And you don't see any sign anywhere. You know what I mean? Like there's not like a big rub or like big scrape or like, a big track even or anything like that. And you're like, what is he talking about? Like, how? Like, there's nothing here, And then, 3 months go by, and then all of a sudden, that old timer killed a big buck in that spot. You know what I mean? It's like,
well, there's something to be said about going with your gut.
Yeah,
I think
100%.
too often the way that our industry has sort of shaped our minds is more along the lines of imagination. So and so has preached on and on again about deer bedding on these points or on benches, or we're thinking about thermals, and these are like the craze words right now. Everybody's talking about this stuff like it's something new, and look, it's not new.
Nope.
Thermals have been around since the hands of time, right? Deer have been doing these same things. They've been bedding in certain locations since the hands of time. They've been traveling the same way. Nothing has changed. It's just that a few people had a voice loud enough to reach an audience that absorbed it. And now all of a sudden, we're approaching hunting like we are reading it out of a textbook rather than just going with our gut and making moves that way. And, you brought up trail cameras. I mean, hey, I use them now. I really do. And I honestly, I'd feel naked now if I didn't. But I'll be damned if I'm not, like, missing those days way back when I started bow hunting. We didn't have trail cameras, and when they first came out, those wildlife eyes, those things were huge and way too expensive. What do I miss now is I miss the fact that, like, I can't relate anymore to the feeling of a deer that I've never seen walk in and then making a decision on the spot. Do I want to harvest this deer or let him walk? Now it's like I went in with the expectation I'm going to see these certain deer, and this is the only one, or these are the only couple that I'm willing to shoot. Our perspectives have changed. Everything about hunting is changing. It's such a rapid pace. It's really not that great if I'm honest.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, man, because this year was I had a good year this year, and one of the reasons why I think, and I've talked about this with some buddies, and I've mentioned it on here, is that this year I felt like I was able to hunt free for the first time in a long time. Like, so some areas I hunted, the deer I killed in Pennsylvania, I had no clue he was there. I just knew the area that I was hunting a couple times the year before, and then I had run trail cameras in it previously, so I had an idea of like what went on. But I had a camera in there, and it died in like June or something like that, and so I had no clue what was happening on that piece, leading up to me killing that deer. And I didn't pull any trail cameras this year. Like I pulled one, but it wasn't necessarily like for the purpose of the hunt. I was curious to see what was on it, what was around during like the summer prior to everything transitioning. And I only ended up hunting that area, I think 2 times the whole year. It was like the first 2 weekends of the season. Then I killed the deer that I killed like the third week. And then going to Kansas, it was, all just glassing and spawning and stalking. You know what I mean? And I killed that deer, and I saw him, and I went and I just killed him. And it was one of those things where I said that, this year was just me being able to hunt free and make decisions based on what I'm seeing in real time, and just being present in the moment and deciding at that moment, like, I'm either going to kill this deer or I'm not, or I'm going to make this move or I'm not, and really letting the deer kind of tell me what to do, and it was a blast, man. Especially like the Kansas one, because it was really kind of like a mobile moving a lot, chess game. And and I never really understood in talking to Jared a few different times about hunting like plains and things like that. I know they don't use, cameras and stuff like that. And I was always kind of like, man, like that would be tough, especially out of state. And a lot of times when I go out of state, I don't have cameras either, but I'm like, to consistently do that, I'm like, that's tough. But now it's like that I've had that experience. Like I get it, it's like, I look forward to that now.
Whitetail adrenaline gets their name. Everybody thinks it's because it's right up in your face and on the ground and eye level. And of course, right? That's the marketing piece. But really, whitetail adrenaline, why it's so great is literally the adrenaline of having a deer you don't always expect to pop up and making the decision on the fly. Am I going to shoot this deer or not?
Yeah.
I mean, it's all about going with your gut. The way Jared hunts, I can tell you from experience, I mean, we'll be on our feet and we're walking and you aren't always creeping around. We're walking at a pretty good clip, but you know when to slow down because you get that sort of a vibe like this is definitely getting deery,
Yeah.
you just slow down and you observe more. I mean, shoot, if you watch that hunt that I did with him, this is a long time ago now. I think it was 2015 or something when I killed that deer you were talking about, the canoe picture on the river. I had missed a 14 or 15 pointer, 30 minutes before I shot that one.
Wow.
And we're talking public land. We are way, way upriver, and we didn't have time because we're thinking on our feet. Well, I guess, yeah, technically on our feet, even though we had a boat. We didn't have time to like go looking around. Is there a put-in access up here? And then we drop the boat here, and then we can go park the car down here. And so we literally parked at the first spot we could find access to that river, and we literally pulled the boat upstream against the current to reach the backside of that public that was up against the water. Hunted, killed that deer, and then we took the river back down. But I'm just saying, man, we were way up there. And when I missed that first big buck, I could have died, man. I felt so stupid. You just think you're on whitetail adrenaline. You get this 15 or 14, I think he was 15 pointer. He had split brows, split twos. He had inline points on both sides. He was just this gnarly creature, and he was rubbing a cedar tree, and I shot right under his armpit, misjudged the yardage, and I got real negative, and Jared said, hey, let's go a little further, and we did, and sure enough, we ended up killing that deer. But if you watch that, not only did we stop in the spot we did to get the shot off at that first one that I missed, because there was a bunch of scrapes, it just smelled like deer. It was a lot of moisture because it had been raining that morning. I don't know if that helped heighten the senses or whatever, but it smelled like deer. So we stayed put and we tucked in for about 25 minutes without moving. And that's when that big one came in and started making a rub. And then when we got up the ridge 30 minutes later, I had just started to say, and this is on record, I was like, man, this is the perfect spot for a big buck to be bed. And then he grabbed the back of my shirt and tugged on it, said, big buck, and the rest is history. that right there is hand in hand in line with what you're saying about just getting that gut feeling, going back to your sixth sense, and, kind of just that whole adrenaline piece. It comes from that. Like, I don't know what deer this is. I don't know how many points he is yet. Let's find out later. Right now, I got to make a decision.
Yeah, man, I love that, dude. It was such a cool season, and it makes me want to hunt more like that. You know what I mean? To where you just kind of you get that feeling, and you don't know what deer's going to come down the trail. You know what I mean? You're just being in the moment. I feel like.
I don't think we should dismiss cameras altogether. Much as cameras do, we do get kind of stuck on that. We have
it's a tool.
We have to admit, like, one good thing that came from this new modern age style of hunting, that the mobile hunters program. I mean, I've been hunting mobily my whole hunting career, hunting on the ground. Couldn't afford tree stands growing up. I mean, I would climb a tree and sit 5 feet off the ground. Now you put your $1,000 tree stand 5 feet off the ground, and somebody takes a picture of it to prove it and then post it on social media because they think that's going to achieve accolades.
Right.
Look, nothing about this is new. Nothing. I mean, people have been at it for years. Just maybe the younger generation, not so much, and that's a damn shame.
Right.
But we used to be married to tree stands. That's something that I will say, because when I finally could afford a tree stand, which I think I bought at a Menards, which is like
Yeah.
a building supply store here in Wisconsin. I don't know if it's outside of Wisconsin or not, but they had a little sporting goods section, and they'd sell tree stands at clearance, and they'd be like $35. And finally, it was like, oh my gosh, I can afford a tree stand. I bought one. I was like, I don't know, 18. And I'll tell you the truth, I hunted out of that thing all the time, and I never moved it. And I think it's probably still in a tree somewhere, the same one that it first went into.
Right.
It's just the truth. And I would put cameras up and just hope that I'm going to see one of those deer that I had, got on camera. Well, now, when hunting different states and like picking up little pieces, because here in Wisconsin, our properties are broken into a mess of 5, 10, 20 acre parcels. Farmers, farming isn't what it used to be, right? You don't see them flourishing in the dairy state like they used to.
Right.
We just don't have that. So what they do is they start selling off their farms into little 20s and 40s. A 180 acre farm is now 5 pieces.
Right.
So as a result of that, you're going to burn a piece out quick. I think 100 acres is small.
Yeah.
I mean, one guy hunting 100 acres, you're going to burn that out in very short order if you're hunting it too much. So I like to get a lot of pieces that I can hunt. And part of that program, I kind of do now rely on trail cameras. As much as and that's what I was saying before, as much as I miss not knowing what's going to show up, it did give me an edge where I kind of can identify what I've got available to go for. And then I can put my time in, proactively, as opposed to the guessing game or the waiting game, whatever you want to say about it. So, there's pros and cons.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, I think whenever there's something new that comes out, and I think this is for the most part true in anything. I don't think just exclusive to hunting. But when you have something new, I think there's a tendency to kind of over rotate toward implementing it and relying on it, right? Because it seems like it's this new piece of information that you just never had before, right? Where the reality is like you probably had that information if you really looked, it wasn't as readily available, right?
Right.
And so, so you use it and it becomes your Bible to a degree until you become kind of numb to it a little bit. And then you realize that it's a tool and it's a component of understanding, right? And so then and then you have more experience too. And so then you start to put it in its kind of appropriate place and how it can help you, And I think that's kind of for me, like how I've adjusted over time is where, I use it more now. To your point, like for me, where I live specifically, there's a lot of smaller pieces, even the public pieces around here aren't real big. And so I almost use the cameras in those scenarios as much to see the foot traffic and people that are kind of walking through to understand like how much pressure am I getting? Like, is it even worth me being here? And then more so in the big woods, that I hunt in a particular area where it's just like tens of thousands of acres. I use that more on a, long-term basis where I'm trying to find trends year over year of how deer are using terrain and how they're moving differently during different times of the season. Cause it might give me a tip as like to where it's like, there's a food source that I missed somewhere in October that lights up every year. And I know that now because I've run truck cameras 3 years and like all of a sudden the pattern shifts. Like from going this way to this way to this way to this way. So there's something over here in October that they really like. So let me figure out what that is. Right. And so that's how I've started using it now, is more so as like a piece to kind of tell me like there's something else I need to investigate, to understand what the deer are doing, and so, and in that way it's become way more effective for me than anything else really.
I've got a guy on my team in Chase Nation who, his name is Joe Brond, and he's a heck of a hunter. I mean, they all are, but Joe has this knack about figuring out public land, and his number one tool is trail cameras. I mean, if you took away his cameras, he'd probably argue this, but I think he'd be a bit lost, because he's really crafted himself around or he's developed his craft of being like a strategic, and I would say, what's the word for it? He gets them consistently, right, on public land, and I think his consistency also comes from his use of trail cameras. The guy will go out and he'll set up cameras all over the place and just random spots that look deery, right? And then he'll get a photo of one that he wants, and then he'll start closing in around that spot until he figures out which direction it's coming from and going, puts a pattern together, and he hones in. In Kansas, you were talking about, kind of going and just shooting off the cuff there, right? But in Kansas, yeah, you can't use trail cameras anymore on public land, but you can still use them on private. And so, it's one of what he did this last year is he went and knocked on doors bordering the public land. And these guys have outfitters that want to hunt out there. They hunt it themselves. They're private. But they had no problem with him putting cameras up on the edges of the private. No problem, which is pretty cool if you ask me. But that's another way. I mean, there's the whole hunting over states thing is another topic, man. That's one that I'm sure we can relate to big time. I'm listening to you talk and your successes this year. By the way, Pennsylvania is a state I've never hunted.
Dude, you got an invite, brother. Let's do it.
I would love to go out there and explore a little bit. It's all hilly out by you, right? I imagine it's like...
Yeah, well, Western... So I'm in Eastern PA. Western PA is definitely more like what you would get like hill country or whatever that you would think of, if you were thinking of Ohio, hill country Ohio. When you get out where I'm at in the eastern part, where I'm at in kind of the southern, southeastern kind of part, it's flat and a lot of swamps, right? So, but I hunt in the north. I hunt in the north too, but there's just not a lot of big pieces of public, right? When you go north, that's when you start to get into like the Pocono Mountains and stuff like that, where you start to get some like elevation and some rugged terrain. And, I think you can get anywhere from like 2,200 to 2,400 feet roughly, in terms of elevation. But the tricky thing is like a lot of times when you travel to hunt there, you're already on top of the mountain usually. And so everything is kind of flat. And when there is a change in elevation, it's sheer. And then there's a lot of like what I refer to as mountaintop swamps where you'll just kind of have like a bunch of pole timber, like you and I could play baseball in it, nothing. And then all of a sudden you'll hit like an area that's just like choked out with mountain laurel that'll dump into like a swamp that's almost impenetrable. You know what I mean?
Cool. So are the deer there kind of nomadic? I mean, they don't have much for food up there. I mean, they're really just browsing.
Yeah. So what I've kind of found and started being able to focus in on a little bit. And I've talked to a couple different buddies about this and a couple guys, that are big woods hunters. And I kind of refer to them as like micro habitats where it's, I'll have walked miles at certain points and not seen like a stitch of deer sign where you'll be like, I don't think there's ever been a deer walk through here, in like the history of this place, and then all of a sudden you'll come along like an area that might only be like 100 yards by 100 yards. And it'll just be a little low line where like the water kind of gathers and creates enough moisture that all of a sudden, boom, it gets real thick. And there's some trees and there's like some swamp grass and just like, it gets real kind of gnarly, and like all of a sudden there'll be an explosion of deer sign. There'll be some food there, and like, there'll be a hammer scrape that's there, and just all the stuff that you're looking for. But like those things might be, good Lord, man, I've probably walked at certain points like 3 to 5 miles between finding different kind of chunks like that, different kind of like habitats like that. And so if you can find where they're at early season, like I think they're pretty predictable, but like finding that, because they can bed anywhere in there too. They don't bed super consistent, at least to my knowledge. And those little micro habitats just aren't clustered together. And so they do travel a lot. It's like the one deer I was on, not this past year, but the year before, was a deer I'd watched for like 3 years. And it's a little bit of ways away from me, so I don't get to hunt it a whole lot. And so I spent probably 2 years of like scouting it, hunting it sparingly, running some trail cameras on it until I started kind of figuring out what deer like to do. I had a beat on one deer and hunted him. I thought I knew what he was doing, hunted him, ended up climbing into a tree, and he was bedded like 40 yards from the tree I was getting into. I didn't realize he was bedded that close. And he jumped up and took off, and I never saw that deer again that year. And then last year, I was tentatively going to hunt him and then ended up killing my deer early so I didn't make my way back up there. But he ended up getting killed in like late rut, and he was killed as the crow flies roughly 5 miles from where I had the encounter with him.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So
And you covered some ground.
yeah, so it's like they're nomadic, they move a lot, you know.
And I mean, 5 miles as the crow flies in hilly terrain like that. That
Yes.
is, I mean, that's like 10 miles
Yeah,
travel.
yeah.
That's a heck of a distance
It's
to
like
go.
I would have never in a million years guessed that that would have been where that deer got killed, you know. And then the weird thing is though, is like you can find some mature deer, like, and he was like, I had 3 years of data on him. So he was at least 6, because he was at least a 3.5-year-old the first time I like found him. But what I do find is that, you know, some of those more mature deer in that area, when they find an area that has what they're looking for, there's one in particular that I know of now. I don't think he moves very far, like all season long, like from start to finish. I think he pretty much stays in a particular area, and he's going to live and die in that spot. And
Sure.
he's probably, I would put him at probably 6, you know.
Well, hopefully he dies at your arrow.
Hopefully me and 2 other buddies kind of know of him, and we're kind of pulling for each other. We've shared information, you know, we all kind of know what he's doing, and so hopefully one of us at least gets an encounter with him or a shot at him. Yeah, we'll be happy if one of us kills him, you know, type of thing.
That's good. That's good to have that kind of friendship with people. A lot of today's hunters, it seems like it's all competitive. It's almost scary to get leases with friends. You know, somebody going to be hiding trail camera pictures, or you never really know.
Yeah, yeah. No, I count myself pretty fortunate in this area, like to have a couple buddies like that we all kind of share intel and stuff. Especially a big. I mean, there's a bunch of really good deer in that area, so it's like there's not a issue of, you know, not being good bucks around. Like we always have a host of bucks that we end up finding, you know, during the course of the year, that any of us would be happy to shoot. But there's just one in particular this year. He just kind of captured our attention. But speaking of like kind of pressured areas, man, because that's the one reason why I like to hunt that areas. I'm able to get away from the pressure because it's, you know, bigger piece, it's rugged, stuff like that. You know, I've never hunted Wisconsin. It's one of the places I want to get to. But I always hear people talking about, you know, how pressured it is, and you know, I know it's got a really thick hunting heritage, so I know there's a lot of hunters. But how do you kind of get around the hunting pressure, or how have you adapted over the years, you know, to the hunting pressure?
Well, it definitely is a way of life here. It's a culture. Land availability is, as far as private land, is nothing like it used to be. It's a totally different game. We have over 7.5 million acres in this state alone of public hunting land. So there's no shortage of public land. You can find it all over the place, right? But if you're looking to hunt private the way that we used to be able to hunt it, where you spot a big one off the road and you try to target permission to get in on that piece, it's not so easy anymore. It's funny, you know, the DNR is saying our license sales are down. Deer hunter numbers are plummeting. And I'm thinking, man, there's a guy hunting every 5-acre piece of woods all over the state. Unless you get above Highway 8, which is the northern part of the state, there's somebody hunting every piece of woods. You see a piece of woods you think looks nice to hunt, somebody's hunting there.
Right.
It, you know, who cares about those days of like, knocking on a door and the guy says, or the family says, yeah, you can hunt here, just don't kill anything, because the second you do, we're going to let everybody know in our family, and suddenly there's going to be everybody wanting to hunt here because we didn't know that there was actually potential. That's something that I used to face, but it's not even an issue anymore. The issue I face today, and maybe not an issue anymore because, you know, loose lips sink ships, that kind of thing. Right. But the issue I face today is, how do you get in on a piece? It's hard. What I used to do, and all the guys, like even friends that aren't on Chase Nation, they text me constantly. Pins on Onyx. Hey, can you get me the phone number for this guy? I want to call and see if I can get permission. I have this knack, and maybe it's my IT experience. I've got 18 years working in IT and in a technical background. but you don't really need to have a technical background and know how to use the internet and be creative with it. You
Right,
just got to
right.
be creative and have the wherewithal to actually put in the effort. Um, but I have a knack of finding people, almost like a damn,
FBI agent or
investigator
something.
or something. Yeah. It can get creepy, I mean, there's times where I'm calling people just the other day, just every day when I leave my house, I drive by this one narrow 30-acre piece, and the guy lives in like Seattle, Washington, and he's a doctor. Why does he own land here in Wisconsin? Who knows? Maybe
Right.
it was left for, to him. But the only phone number I can find for him is his doctor's office. Now I've left him 2 voicemails seeking a call back, and I haven't got one, but I'm not going to give up. I keep literally a journal in my truck like a nerd with phone numbers, names, ages, like age ranges. And I'll sometimes have 3 or 4 different phone numbers, and half of them might be disconnected, and the other couple might be like fax lines that give you that weird,
Right.
weird sounds.
Yeah.
And then finally, you get that one number, and nobody wants to answer anymore because they don't recognize the number because the spammers. They screwed it all up for us. You
Right.
can't go knock on doors anymore without somebody like peeking out their blinds, like, who the hell is at my door? It's like they're afraid to answer. So our society and culture has ruined that in the United States with crime. So now we're forced to make phone calls. But now these spammers have screwed up phone calls, so people don't want to answer anymore. It's like it has become so hard to get access on private lands in the state of Wisconsin. I was talking before, dairy farms aren't what they used to be. They're getting bought out by these larger conglomerate farms that buy up the smaller farms so they can put it under their one big umbrella. Well, what do these guys do? Some of them sell it to the big farms, and sometimes the farm hands go and hunt, or they get big dollars from outfitters or big leases. And some people sell their farms, they parcel them out. Like I said, you take a 120-acre farm or 180, and you sell a bunch of 20s for a bunch of money. They get rich. You hear that a lot here. Farmers will say, "I'm cash poor, I'm land rich."
Right. Yeah.
That's really what it means. And it's a good way to retire. Sell off my parcels. Well, now I can't hunt this whole ridge system along the backside of this big egg field because it's owned by 5 different people. So, and they're narrow. A lot of Wisconsin is this way. And so you get permission on one, and then the deer runs across the property line under the neighbors. Well, somebody else is probably already hunting there. So now you got to go through that person and the landowner to get permission to go track your deer. It's not so easy as it used to be. And sure, the landowner says, yeah, go track your deer. But then you do it, and then the guy in the tree stand doesn't know that you talked to the landowner, and he
Right.
comes down and is mouthing off, and it's a big mess. That's how it really is, at least in these larger populated areas like where I'm from. I'm from the southeastern part of the state. You get a little further west, and the population density is smaller. There's less big cities, more villages and towns. If you're a hunter, chances are you probably own the land that you're hunting because they're bigger parcels out that way.
Right.
Land is less expensive until you get into like the more popular counties, like Vernon County, or obviously everybody knows Buffalo County, Crawford County, Rock County, Iowa County. These are counties where big giant bucks have been known to be added to the record books, and everybody wants to hunt there. So suddenly land prices go up.
Right.
What's really neat about this state, I'll tell you this. You can drive, let's just start with our capital. If you're in Madison, our capital, and you drive hour and a half west, you are in bluff country. I mean, you're up in some big steep hills, and it's beautiful. It's almost like you just left this state to go to another. Which one? I don't know. It almost looks like Pittsburgh minus the city with the
Right.
hills. Then you go east of Madison, and you're in swamp country. You're in marshes and swamps, You go into the center part of the state or around Dane County where Madison is, and it's all farm country. It's real flat. Not Indiana boring flat, but,
Right.
it's a bunch of square cornfields, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You get up into northeast Wisconsin, and it's a bunch of sand and clay, so crops don't grow for nothing. So you don't see egg fields up there north of Anago. All you see is, coniferous. You see a bunch of pines. You see some swamps up there with dogwood and tag alders and birch. Those deer are totally nomadic, eating bark and eating pine cones. And really, if you want to kill a deer in the northeast part of the state, you ought to be hunting along the roads, because just about everybody up there along the highways is feeding the deer in the backyard, calling them a squirrel feeder. So the
Right.
deer travel them just like an eagle flies over a river.
Right.
If you go to the northwest part of the state, it's a little bit more egg friendly. You got some richer soil, and you'll see fields up there, and there's a ton more deer up in Bayfield County, which is the northwesternmost part of our state. But those fields, they don't have a long enough growing season to put like corn in, so you'll see a lot of hay, alfalfa fields.
Yeah.
You'll see them, do beans and stuff like that, but you just won't see crops like corn up there, which is what it is. But my point is, if you come to this state, brother, you can go to like 5 different states all in one trip within the same border. It's that
Right.
kind of rich habitat. You got a bunch of everything here. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah, man. I need to make it out there at some point. I've got enough. I've got enough good buddies that live there and or have hunted there. That have.
Hey, but we got big deer here. We
Right.
absolutely have big deer here. Don't be fooled. Everybody thinks of Iowa and Kansas, and sure, yeah, okay, there's less hunting there. There's going to be bigger deer and more expansive properties, and sure, there's obvious reasons why. But Wisconsin, despite all these small acre parcels, we still have giant deer, and we're kicking out monsters every year. I mean, look at the king buck. I mean, and that's
Yeah.
just one of many, right?
Right. Yeah. That was the one thing I was curious about, was just like, I've known of Wisconsin, especially in its heyday,
Yep.
rivaling any other state, for monster deer. And I was just curious, and I have some buddies that have killed some hammers like in the past couple years from Wisconsin. Where would you say it's at as far as like versus its historical kind of performance?
Well, yeah, like history, right, when we talk about bow hunting, is really 20-year span. I mean, 20 years ago was way different than it is now. 30 years ago, even more. 30 years ago, you could knock on just about any door, and the likelihood of somebody bow hunting there was really minuscule.
Right.
20 years ago, it was more work, right? But it was still a little bit more feasible. You'd have one guy kind of running the mill on like 100+ acre piece, and but now it is so dramatically different. Listen, I don't know what other states are like, because this is where I've lived my whole life, but I will tell you, and I mean, I travel a lot, but I don't know necessarily what cultures are like in other states. But the hunting society here in Wisconsin is so strong. They even close schools down like the Friday before the opening day of the firearm season.
Yep. Same
So
thing here.
kids can drive and go do deer camp. I mean,
Yep.
it's a holiday here.
Yep. Same thing here in PA. Yeah, it's like I've never worked, or I shouldn't say I never worked. When I was a kid growing up, we never had school on the first day of deer season. That was always off. Like that, it was the first day of buck season and the first day of doe season. Like we always had those days off from school. And I remember it was a culture shock for me whenever I went to college, because I went to school out near Pittsburgh initially, and and deer season was coming up, and I was like looking at my class schedule. I was like, "What?" I was like, "We don't have the first day of deer season off." And like, I remember like the guys that I made friends with, like when I first got to school, were like, "What are you talking about, deer season?" I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Dude, we had first day of hunting season off like always." And they were from Pittsburgh. They're like, "Are you serious?" And I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "We never had that." And I was like, and I thought just growing up where I grew up, I was like, "Man, everyone must got that."
Yeah,
You know what
no,
I mean?
that's
I was like,
well, I can't imagine everywhere is like that, and
no,
not everywhere in Wisconsin's like that too. I mean, some towns do it, some villages. Some I don't know that any cities really would offer it,
right,
um, but yeah, the hunting in Wisconsin is it has changed a lot in the last 20, 30 years. There's one thing that I'm not very forgiving about, and that's, sorry excuses. People that hunt public land and say, I'm only hunting public land because it's all I got. Okay, is a fallback. I will, and I've killed a lot of deer, and a lot of them have been on public. But I will never, ever be one of those guys that says I only hunt public because I could give a damn what anybody thinks about the challenge of hunting public versus private. Anybody that doesn't understand how hard it can be to kill a deer on private, that thinks that it's easy, just might not have very much experience hunting private, or what it takes, the amount of work it takes to actually get permission on private. It's a case of laziness or not having the wherewithal to seek out private. That is the only real excuse, and that's a legitimate excuse. Somebody that's willing to say, I just didn't put work into it.
right.
Fair. But don't say I can't hunt private because I can't find I don't have any place any private to hunt. It doesn't start and end with just your personal contacts. Like, oh, I don't know anybody that owns land that I can hunt on. Me neither.
Right.
But what I do is I sit there with this thing and I go sort like looking on OnX, scouting from outer space. I'm pulling over, I'm glassing properties from afar, from the road. I'm marking pins on my app, and I'm looking at them later, and I'm looking up those property owners, and I'm journaling all the info I was talking about before.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes on my drive home from work, I will literally go through about 6 or 7, maybe 10 phone numbers, and I'll hear a whole lot of no's. But just once in a while, you get a yes or a maybe, and that's a step in the right direction. So for the last, 15 years at least, I don't think I can remember a season that's gone by where I didn't have 3 or 4 little, 5 acres here, 7.5 there, 20 over there, and then I got this one 80-acre piece. And maybe once in a while I'll get like a honey hole, like somebody gave me permission to a monster farm. But those are short-lived typically,
Right.
from my experience. But I always had places to bounce around, and then if I'm burning those out or the winds are just always wrong to hunt them, then I got public to hunt. And I
Right.
don't feel bad for hunting public just because I have permission to hunt private. There's
Yeah.
also that notion, like, I know some guys feel like, well, hey, if you got permission on private, then leave the public alone. You got to leave it for guys like us that don't have the, privilege of hunting private land. And I'm thinking to myself, like, hell, I'm going to do that. There's no
Right.
feeling, I'm not feeling bad at all. It's
Right.
for
And you
all,
shouldn't.
and
Yeah.
I'll put in equal work hunting public as I do on the private. But yeah, man, it's a real challenge.
Yeah, dude. I mean, the
Neighborhoods, dude, they're sprawling.
yeah.
Neighborhoods left and right, buying up farms, offering these developers
Mm-hmm.
millions of dollars. Hey, we'll give you X, Y, $1 million to buy your field,
Right.
and we're gonna develop it.
Yeah.
I just had one go up here. I had about 60 acres of field and 10 acres of hardwoods. I've killed 9 bucks that I've had that are trophy animals off this one property over the last 17 years. And the landowner calls me and says, "You got to get your stands out of there and any cameras." And I'm like, "What?"
Oh,
And
man.
it literally, since last fall, they have already built like 7 houses on that field. It's
Wow.
it's insane.
Yeah.
There's a pond on it now. What in the hell? How? It's just crazy.
Yeah, man. And I totally get you, man. Because like to me, there's challenges and there's pros, and I don't want to say pros and cons, but like there's challenges. There's things that are more challenging and things that are easier with each kind of aspect of
Yeah.
the type of land, right? And for me, it's we have, if I'm willing to travel back home, like we've got a 60 acres. We have close between my dad, my father-in-law, and like my my grandfather who had passed away, there's close to like 500 acres that I could go hunt it back home if I wanted to go hunt it. And I used to, but it was a several hour drive for me to get back there. And when I kind of switched and started hunting more of the public that was around me was because there was a particular deer I was chasing and I knew where he was at. And I knew he was bedded on like the neighbors and I couldn't hunt the neighbors and I had to hunt off the line. And so it's like, I got one crack at him and he was with a younger deer and like the younger deer got under my stand. It was like the opening day and he got spooky and left. And so I kind of made a decision at that point because I was like, man, I want to be able, if I know where there's a deer, I want to be able to move far enough to be able to try to go kill it, as opposed to like with that particular deer, I was kind of hamstrung by the property line. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
And so I started focusing on the public that was around me and in some of the stuff that was a little further away. And part of it was that, I could, a good buddy of mine knocks on a ton of doors when he used to live around. He lives in Idaho now, and he used to get permission all over the place. He had so many permission pieces and would kill really good bucks. And for me, to your point, it's like I was honest with myself where I was like, man, it's just easier for me to go scout and try to figure it out on public than it is for me to go knock on doors. Like, I just, what I mean? Like, that's harder for my personality. Like, that's harder for me to do than it is just to go walk. You know what I mean? And so I made the decision where I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do that because I'm not real good at that. I'm not a, like you
people
have the
person.
Yeah,
like,
you have the knack for it.
Person, you host a podcast, but you're not into like the door knocking or the phone call.
Yeah.
That's not your thing.
That's not my thing, And so
but
to
you're
your
man
point,
enough to say that. That's the reason.
That's the reason why.
It's legit.
I've even had my buddy Wilson, who had places, who like he lives in Idaho now, that he clearly doesn't hunt, right? And he's like, dude, I'll send you the contact information. So his father-in-law was a pastor at the local church that he went to, and Wilson was a youth pastor there as well. And so he had a great in because he would, like the congregation, they all knew he hunted. And so if they had 20 acres behind their house or a small hobby farm or whatever, they would say, hey, come hunt our place sometime, And so he just had tons of access. And so when he left, he was like, man, I'll send you some pins. These people know me really well. They still know the family. Like, just, I'll give you their number. Just go to their house, knock on their door, tell them, you're buddies with me. A couple of the places I actually went and hunted with him because we went just like doe hunting together or whatever. Like, we'd go sit in a blind or something like that, shoot the breeze. Weren't really intended on killing anything, to be quite honest. It was just more hanging out together,
Sure. Yeah.
And he's like, I'll send you some of the contacts. Just go. He's like, they'll let you hunt. Don't, just go tell them you're buddies with me and you'll be fine. And I'm like, dude, I'm not doing that.
Dude, you know what? And hopefully he had permission to let you do that. That made my mind go to a lot of different places that
I would always ask him to let them know if he was telling me that, because there was one in particular. This just happened like 2 weeks ago. He was like, hey, there's a place, that I took, that you and I went together, and hunted. He was like, you should go back there. And I was like, okay. I was like, and that one, because I had met the person before,
Sure.
like I'd met them outside, like they came out and we talked as we were going into the woods, and then they came back out to see how we did. And so I kind of met them. And then when he had his going away party to go to Idaho, like I met them at his party too, And so he's like, you should go back and hunt that. And I was like, all right. I was like, I'll give them a call. I was like, but you call them first and let them know that you spoke to me and that, I'm going to be giving you a call if they're okay with it. He was like, okay, cool. Well, it turns out they ended up like, they don't have the, like they sold some of the property or something like that. Something happened where they don't have all the property they had before. And so it's just basically the lot that their house is on now. So the woods behind their house, they don't own any longer. Yeah. And so, but that was an instance there where it's like, okay, so they don't have it. But I was always adamant on like, dude, if you're setting me up with somebody, I'm terrible at the cold call. I was like, and so, and I'm uncomfortable doing it to begin with. And so it's like even worse if you don't set me up for it and they don't know that I'm coming, A
lot of guys, at least here, I don't know what it's like. I'm sure it's similar in a lot of states or everywhere, but I can just speak on Wisconsin. We have a whole lot of people who got permission once, and then they think that means that they can hunt there forever.
Yeah.
So I'll talk to landowners that say, I'm okay with it if you go hunting back there, but I need to check with a guy that I let hunt out there a couple years ago. I'm not sure if he's still hunting out there or not. that to me, I'm always like, are you kidding me? There's not one place that I hunt privately where I do not check in with that landowner at least annually to make
Yeah.
sure it's still okay for me to hunt there.
Yeah.
It's just a
Yeah, I mean, there's really good
practical.
ways. There's really good ways to keep in contact with them because, again, I wasn't doing this because I didn't have the access. But like Wilson, I would just marvel at the way he kind of did it because it was just kind of like he loved shed hunting, he loved turkey hunting, he loved goose
Yeah.
hunting, he loved duck hunting, he loved dove hunting. Like so, he would go and hunt these places like during those seasons, and it was more of like
Icebreaker.
right. It was more of like a hey, see, Susie Joe and be like, hey, Susie, turkey season's coming in. I was thinking maybe coming over to your farm doing a little turkey hunting. Is it still all right? And be like, oh yeah, you're good anytime,
Yeah.
Or hey,
That's the way to
Bob,
do it.
I was planning to bring my dog out and do some shed hunting. I was going to hit your farm. Is that okay? And like, oh yeah, hey, I was going to maybe slide by and turkey hunt this year too. It's, oh yeah, you want to kill some deer? Come back during the fall. It's like, and that's how
Yeah.
he would kind of keep the whole like all the relationships going. It was he would use like the other hunting seasons, as like. And he was honest about it. He wanted to hunt and he was doing that stuff, but it was like another way for him to just to stay in contact with the person and make sure everything was kosher whenever deer season rolled around.
Now, when I think about leaving the state, when I go approach other states, um,
Yeah,
one
what's your
of
secret
my
sauce for that, man?
yeah, well, literally, it's water. I go back to it again and again. When I am going to another state, I am always looking for public land that's along waterways because waterways are public. So as long as I can get on that water, I can access that public, and I can just be certain that there are so few people willing to put in that level of effort to go hunting for a couple hours in the evening or in the morning that I probably won't have a whole lot of competition as long as I stay on that back side of that piece. You know what I mean? And like, it doesn't matter if it's a lake or if it's a pond or if it's an island that I'm trying to get to or a river. It doesn't matter. Just as long as I've got some sort of access to that water, whether it's a boat or hip boots or waders, chest waders, whatever I need to do to get across that water to access that piece, that is my number one thing. So when I start scouting other states like Minnesota or Iowa or Kansas or Nebraska, which didn't really pan out because there wasn't a whole lot of water that we found out there, or North Dakota, again, another state, didn't find, there's tons of little potholes everywhere,
Right.
full of ducks, but nothing substantial where I found public along it. There was one giant piece of public along the river there, but it was hammered with guys, which they all seemed to do pretty well there. Maybe I should have put more time in, but I didn't. So some states just don't have that water access that that I look for. But that's the first thing I'm doing is looking for water access. Once I can't find water access, then I start to broaden my search a little bit. And again, this isn't about, for me, it's not about having I film everything that I do. It's part of Chase Nation. But okay, admittedly, getting in the water and going, putting the extra effort in to go the extra mile looks great on film. It's not why we do it. We literally do it because it is intelligent, right? And it's been an option since that I can remember. It's really popular right now. Like, let's all buy a kayak and go paddle across the lagoon and come on.
Right.
Just people using boats to access hard to get to spots has always been a tactic. It's just finally growing some legs
Notoriety.
that people are finding out about it, and that's another thing. I just made a post on Facebook the other week about the boat choices, and I think you and I touched on this earlier.
Yeah.
But like, it makes sense in states that are warmer, right? But here in the upper Midwest, it's cold in the fall. Shoot, it's cold during the summer. We have like what, two months where it's pretty okay,
Right.
but it's dang cold. So I will be damned if I'm gonna be caught out there in late October through November, kayaking with a paddle going like this, with the water dripping down the paddle, getting on my hands, making my hands cold. Once your hands get wet, they get saturated and they don't dry. It's almost like a pair of cotton, pants that get wet. It's going to take hours to dry. When your hands start to turn white and get shrivelly because they're so wet, that takes forever to dry. And when they're cold, it takes even longer. So it makes no sense to me. Plus, your lap is getting wet sitting there doing that. I understand the mobility of it. The kayaks are light. They're mobile. Easy to pick up, throw in the bed of your truck or whatever. But you know what? So is a canoe. And you can't necessarily, they're longer. 12-footer or 14-footer is definitely not going to be easy to just load up in the back of your truck. I get it. Yeah, you could tie it to the top, to your roof. And that's the way I typically do it unless I'm in my pickup. But like, I'm the type that I'll use whatever boat I have. If a kayak is my only option, yeah, I'm going to use a kayak.
Right.
I'm not going to turn it down, right? I got to do what I got to do, but that is the last boat that I'm thinking of, and I'm definitely not going to spend a lot of money on it. So a lot of those pictures that you've seen of me, like accessing properties in boats or having deer in the boat, they're usually crappy old things with holes in them that are, next to sinking the next time I take them out. We got to patch them all the time. They don't have much dollar value to them. They're not that pretty, but they work and they get you where you need to go. I'd rather have a trailer hooked up to the back of my car, my truck, with a canoe or a little V-hull or a John boat than anything else, to be fair.
Yeah.
Something else, we were talking about marsh skis.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome, right? But here's something that a lot of people don't know about either. A lot of the water that you access, like in marshes, right? Or even like skinny rivers, where, okay, yeah, you have some deep holes on the outside bends, but a lot of those straight and narrow or those just straightaways on smaller rivers and tributary rivers, they will be super skinny. And you can't dig a paddle deep enough. Or like in Minnesota, a lot of those rivers in southeastern Minnesota and in those hills, they're really rocky and they get really shallow. There's shoals everywhere, and it's a pain in the butt. Even paddling downstream can be hard. Like, you can't dig your paddle in. Your boat is noisy. It's going to bottom out. It's going to rub on the rocks, and it's going to scare everything for a few hundred yards down the river because the reverb going off of the hills, just traveling just like a cyclone down the river of volume. The best way that I've learned, and I learned this years ago with my old man, was using push poles. Always, always, always have a push pole. And a push pole is nothing more than just a long metal pole that's designed, if you look it up, it's called a push pole. But you don't see those sold just out willy-nilly at like Cabela's or Bass Pro Shops. You got to find a place that actually sells them, or you got to learn how to make them. My dad would make everything. So he would make them out of wood or metal, right? Use pipes and then round them off on the end so they don't fill with water, so you keep your gloves dry or your hands dry. And then he'd wrap them up so you had somewhere, not cold metal on your hands that you could grab onto. But the idea is you push it down and then you just keep going up until you get to the top, and then you push it the rest of the way, and that gives you a lot of forward momentum. And you get through this skinny water that you can't dig a paddle down into. Push poles are like a huge trick of the trade that you got to have years of experience, or you got to be taught. So I'm just offering it as free knowledge. Push poles exist. I mean, come on, guys. When you see those guys fishing saltwater for bonefish or redfish up in the flats, you see the captains up there with giant push poles. It's the same concept.
Yep.
But apply it to these skinny rivers or marshes where you've got like nasty like silt this far under the surface, and then it's like 4 feet of literally mud that you're trying to sludge through. Plus you got these little lily pads everywhere that's already slowing down your momentum. Use a push pole.
Nice, man. I'm going to have to get a push pole now. There's a spot that I get into that
Seriously.
that's all lily pads and just hot garbage. I made the mistake of like had my my waders on, and I was like, I think I'm close enough to the shore. I was like, I'll just hop out. I was like, I could probably just pull myself in. So I went to hop out and it hit exactly what you said. It was like some real light mud, and I was like, "Oh, this isn't so bad." And then I thought I would hit solid, and it just like turned into like stickier mud.
Yeah,
It was a bad deal,
dude.
you
Yeah,
know?
it's a raw deal for sure. I mean,
Yeah,
and like anybody that like I used to think, man, I am physically fit. I work out. I stay trained. I eat well. I can move through current. I will jump out of this boat like Jared and I did, and I will drag it 2 or 3 miles against the current with water rushing against my shins. Especially when you get done hunting
yeah.
and you need to, like, say you took the easy route and you didn't plan ahead. I'll tell you a couple ideas for that in just a second. I won't forget. Don't let me forget.
All right.
Tactics to get back to your car.
Okay.
Okay. But if you got a paddle, so you took the easy route in, you put in, maybe you're by yourself or you and your buddy, and you only got one car and you don't have a bicycle, and you put in, you go downstream, you hunt, and it gets dark, it's wet, it's cold, or maybe it's one or the other, and it's dark out, everything's harder now, and you've got to get back upstream and get back to your car. You went there with charisma and energy, and you thought, oh, by the end
Yeah.
of the day, yeah, we'll just paddle twice as hard and we'll get back up that current. No, it's not that easy. And there's so many factors that can change things. Like this year, I went down the river that same way with Travis, and we were out there filming in Minnesota. No, sorry, this is 2 years ago. I'm getting confused because it's a new year, new season. So 2 seasons ago, we go down river, and we're scouting a piece a day before opener. It starts to rain. So what happens? You got hills that are really steep coming down into the river. And all that runoff, that rain, just goes down like a waterfall, and that river gorges. I mean, it swells up. Next thing you know, the current that was pretty challenging is now like real challenging. Now she's ripping, right?
Mm.
And so we start paddling, and we're not getting anywhere fast at all. I think we made 75 yards in maybe like an hour, and burnt out of energy. It's dark out. It's like, shoot, we are up shit creek without a paddle. I mean, for real. And tomorrow we got to be up early and have energy to come do this again and actually go hunting. Dude, what a scary situation. You don't want to find yourself in that situation. So one of those other tips of the trade when you're using water access on rivers is you need to find yourself a put in and a takeout. A takeout should always be downstream, and you need to think ahead. If you don't have two cars, one that you could park down there and then drive back and then put in, and then you float downstream and one guy gets in the car, if you
Yeah.
can't do that, then bring a bike. And if you can't afford a fancy e-bike like where a lot of us are starting to drive these days, who the hell cares? Get yourself a pedaler, just get a gear bike.
Mm-hmm.
But some mode of transportation, and pre-route that or pre-map that route back to your car, so you're not like confused and lost and disoriented if it's dark. You got to do all this pre-thinking when you're especially out of state in places that are foreign to you, using the rivers. Because I'll tell you what, man, the first time I ever felt anxiety was like 6 years ago, another similar occasion where we found ourselves down a river in terrible conditions, got late, and we were unable to get back to our vehicle. And I thought, with the weather that it turned into, we're going to need to flip this boat, and we're going to need to camp underneath this boat. Batteries on the phone are dead, and even if we had life in our phones, we can't call out because the hills, the bluffs are too steep. We can't get a signal. We're legitimately screwed. That is scary. Don't put yourself in that position.
Yeah, that's a bad deal there, man. Yeah, I mean, things with water just in general make it a little bit dicier, right? It's like you just got to be careful and plan and have a plan A, B, and C kind of.
Oh, dude.
Right. It's always kind of weird too. It's like because a lot of times when I'm doing it, I'm pretty much solo all the time when I hunt. So it's even like the water access stuff. It's there's been a few times where it got a little weird. getting back, where the wind picked up way. Yeah. I was watching the weather and I knew the wind was going to pick up and I was like, I think I'll be all right. And then whenever I was getting ready to get out, it was like the wind was ripping and the water was not friendly. And I was like, shit. I was like, this is a little bit Western.
Rough water can make it pretty scary and make it tough, right?
Yeah.
Here's another thing to think about. And this didn't even cross my mind until it happened. I was out duck hunting, and we were out in a marsh, and who cares what I was hunting for, okay? Think, is you're a whitetail hunter, this can happen to you. Out in this marsh, we got cattails about 75 yards out into the lake. There was a channel, a really narrow channel that had been pre-established for duck hunters to access the water. And my dad would have used his marsh skis and dragged the canoe through the marsh. I'll send you some pictures, show you what I mean. But at this particular spot, that's what happened. Well, so I'm out there duck hunting for like 3 hours. It was bluebird skies. All of a sudden, the radar says storm's moving in. Out there waterfowling, I'm like, shoot, that's great. Birds are going to be moving. They're going to be flying really low. No issues with that. We're prepared. We got stuff to keep ourselves dry. What I wasn't prepared for was when that wind picked up. Wind can push cattail bogs. So that channel that got back to the launch closed. That gap was invisible. Wow. So it gets dark out, and we're trying to find our way back to the launch, and literally looking at the phone is the only thing that told us where we were. And it was very obvious that the spot that we used to get in wasn't there anymore, because it said we were at the end of that channel or near it, and it wasn't there. And we were so dog tired, and the storm was so bad. I mean, it was thunderstorming, and it was ripping wind, and it was raining, it was dark, and it was colder than heck. And there was no way that we were going to drag the boat through the cattails, because we had no idea what we were up against. We had hip boots on. Hip boots don't go up to your chest; they go below your waist. Mm-hmm. And who knows what you're walking in the dark. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And we had a long way, so that's scary. So think about that. Anybody listening, cattails aren't tight to the bottom. They are literally a floating bog, and it's like a floating island, and they might stay in place for years, but they have they can shift, and they can float across. You can see islands of cattails float across certain lakes, like Lake Puckaway here. That happens. So other things to think about that you wouldn't foresee.
Yeah, man. It always takes a little extra planning. You know, I'm usually pretty good about letting my wife know where I'm going to be, and and I have we have a daughter, so we have life, like the 360 thing on our phones, like so we can see, like if she goes away or whatever, we can see like where she's at, what she's doing, or whatever. And
so it's like share your location with your partner for sure.
I do. You know what I mean? So we all have that on our phone as a family. That way, when she's out of town with like friends, or or just going with her grandparents, because she's 15 now, so she's not like completely independent. But so we all three have it on our phone, and so I always turn mine on whenever I go to hunt. That way, my wife will always know like roughly where I'm at, especially whenever I'm on the water, and she'll know, like, because I'll always text her, like, especially if I'm using water, it's like, hey, just got out of the boat, gonna head to where I'm gonna hunt, and then whenever I leave, I text her like, hey, I'm at the boat. I'll text you whenever I'm back to the truck or whatever.
Yeah.
And she worries, man. It's like she'll basically watch, me float through this water like for 45 minutes or however long it takes me to get from point A to point B. You know what I mean? Watching me along the way. And if I stop for some reason, she's like, what the hell is he stopping for? It's like, But speaking of planning though, dude, what's your plans for 2024, man? What you got going on this year?
Yeah, it's going to be a busy one. I'll be honest, man. Zone 5 in Iowa is the only part that I want to go in. It's because I'm real stubborn. That's where I intended to hunt when I started putting in for my Iowa points. Now, after 2 years of not getting drawn, I tried drawing with 4, and I tried drawing with 5. Now I got 6 points. I'm guessing that I'm going to draw Zone 5, my third attempt, with 6 points. If I don't, then what in the hell is going on?
Yeah,
right?
No doubt.
I'm too stubborn to just go hunt somewhere else in the state, because that's where I wanted to go. I put all my effort into that spot, like thinking ahead and scouting and whatnot. So Joe Braun and I are going to go down. He took his mom hunting down there this last year. He set out 9 Blackgate cameras, and they ran them for a little less than a month. He went down there for one day to put those cameras out. He watched them, found out where other hunters were going, like you kind of do. And he also got an idea where the deer were. And then he went down there on the third hunt. They killed upper 160s on camera, which that episode will be coming out at the beginning of our season here.
Nice.
In September when we start rolling out season 8 at Chase Nation. So we're going back down there because there's a few other bucks that he knew about that he kept getting pictures of throughout the season. So we're going to go redeploy more cameras down there, and that's what one of our plans is. That's going to be right around Halloween. Joe is leaving Iowa to go straight to Kansas. I'll come home and probably hunt more here. I've been fortunate and killed quite a few deer in the first week or two of the season in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. If I am that lucky again, great. If I'm not, I will try to kill one here. Mm-hmm. Then in December, I'm going out to Nebraska for muzzleloader. And I also picked up 40 acres and a lease with two close friends, one of them part of Chase Nation, Matt Hazel, down in central Illinois I can't think of the name of the county. Well, it's central Illinois. And it's a great piece. I'm excited to hunt down there. There's a cabin on the property we can stay in, so probably spend some time down there. So between Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin and Nebraska, those are going to be like the 4 I concentrate on the most. I will say if I do kill one down in Iowa and I come back to Wisconsin and my tag here is already filled, this is just, hopeful, right? But I will jet out to Minnesota and I'll hunt the shotgun opener out there too. So we'll see how she all pans out.
Nice, man. That's a good season there, buddy. That's a full season. You got a full plate, but a lot of good hunts, man.
Yeah, and I'm engaged now, and I got to make sure that this one sticks around and can deal with my obsession for the outdoors. The last one it didn't work out so hot, and sad to say, but that was one of her reasons for being the way she was and us splitting up is because of my involvement with the outdoors. I'm not planning on changing that part about me, and the girl I got now seems to understand it and appreciate and respect it. But I also need to respect and appreciate her and not overstep that line of becoming too obsessive. So I'm going to try to balance. That work-life balance is always,
a tricky one.
Dude, we have to. That's some serious stuff, man.
Yeah.
So
it
I
really
gotta
is.
make sure I balance her out.
Yeah, it's unfortunately for me, it's like 2 years ago I added another one with adding jujitsu into the mix. You know what I mean? So it's like even my off season now, it's just all jujitsu. Like it just consumes me, and then hunting season comes and that consumes me. So, but to your point, my wife's awesome.
You and I would probably bar fight way different, man. I'm just like, look, give me a couple of bottles and I'll crack one over the guy's head, and you'll be like.
Nice, man. Well, hey, buddy, I've kept you here, a little over an hour and 20 minutes. I want to be sensitive to your time, but before you jet out of here, let people know where they can find what's going on with Chase Nation and when you drop the new episodes.
I appreciate it, man. So we got our website, chasenation.tv. We got our e-commerce, our online store there. You can find our merchandise. You can find out what we're up to on the website. And you can have a look at all of our partners. Then we also stream on Carbon TV, and we have 4 different show titles. We have Taste of the Wild, which is our favorite outdoor wild game recipes or fresh caught fish recipes. We've also got Campfire Stories, which is it's a documentary style. It's no longer than 7 minutes per episode, unless we got a really good one that might go a little longer. So that happens. But basically, we just have to have a flame. We started out we'll just film these all by a campfire and then have one of the hunters from Chase Nation tell their version of the story behind one of their hunts. Mm-hmm. And then we'll use never-before-seen footage from the hunt that never made it to the final cut. Mm-hmm. And then we'll have them, their ability to tell the story is different than mine. So as the producer, as the editor, they send me all their footage, right? Mm-hmm. And I look at it and I piece it together, and I do it chronologically. I'm never skipping ahead. I always do it in order that it happened. But the camera's only on so much, and there's always parts of the story that aren't captured on film. this is their story, their version of that story. You know, what wasn't captured, let everybody know. And it's really cool. But it started out trying to be around a campfire, but that's too dang hard because the weather's not always permitted. So now we've done we've done everything from fireplaces, gas and wood. We've done wood burning stoves. We've done all of it.
Right.
So campfire stories, and then we've got our visual storytellers series. That's our short films, like what we've entered into Badlands Film Fest, and like our real cinematic films, where the videography and the production quality is top tier. And then we've got our unscripted adventures. That's our flagship. That's our that's how we grew legs under us. So all 4 show titles are available on Carbon TV. You can watch us on KOTV, which is on Roku, channel on Roku. And you can also find everything, just a modge podge, a bunch of playlists on YouTube.
Right.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, dude, you got some killer stuff, dude. I've had the opportunity to watch, a fair amount of it. And
cheers, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Put blood, sweat, and tears into it, and it started out as a passion project. I just am addicted to the camera. I love editing almost as much as I love, shooting a big buck. Yeah. Whether I'm behind the camera or in front of it makes no difference. I'm just obsessed with it.
Yeah.
So this started literally. This wasn't a ploy to make money or start a business. This was just this was a man behind a camera who just wanted to share and bring this stuff to life for people that didn't have the opportunity to get outside as much as I do. And it's really grown into something even more now as a result of a bunch of people being so awesome and generous to watch our footage and share it and all that. So
yeah, no, the footage is really good. Like the videography is really good. That's always the thing that I'm kind of struck by, whenever I watch your stuff, where it's like the videography, most of the time I'm watching on YouTube, I'm sitting on my couch, and it's like, and the videography is beyond YouTube worthy. It's like the thing that I always kind of notice when I hop on and watch. I'm like, man, this stuff is like, yeah. So really good stuff. So my point being is that just mentioning for folks, like there's great stuff on there now. You don't have to wait for the next season to drop, season 8 to drop. You can go in there and watch some killer hunts and killer content now. So
yeah. Oh, we got like 200 videos. You can just you could sit there for a month watching it on repeat. Not on repeat, but just on continuous. You'll never run out of content.
Yeah.
But our new season 8, does launch September 1st, and it'll be a weekly progression. Every week we're going to roll out a new episode. We'll have that through the entire fall into winter. We have a ton of new content coming.
Awesome, brother. Well, hey, man, I appreciate you. Good luck this season. Let's make sure we stay in touch, and we'll not make it so long until we talk the next time.
Hey, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening, and if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast, and hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. And before I shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Osseo Gear, Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.